So last week when I was sans internet for a bit, I had to resort to doing list videos that ended up, well, not really being list videos. Well, I'm told they weren't really list videos because they did more than just list things. They actually gave information, so I must have done something right. But one of those what culture style videos looked at drivers who had injuries that ended their times in Formula 1, but they were still able to compete in other series. And speaking of what culture and injuries, did you know that JBL beat up Blue Meanie on ECW One Night Stand, and then Stevie Richards hit JBL with a chair on SmackDown as a receipt? But anyway, what? Anyway, one of the drivers in that video was a man called JJ Leto. I won't say his full Finnish name because I'll just butcher it, but he had a promising F1 career, but it was all unravelled when he broke his neck in testing and then tweaked it again during that San Marino Grand Prix that everyone would rather forget. Yeah, he was racing with a broken freaking neck. It's true, it's damn true. Okay, that's the last wrestling reference. But following the end of his F1 career in 1994, JJ got a call up to be part of a project at Le Mans for 1995, driving a car I've been meaning to talk about for a while now, the McLaren F1 GTR. Like the Jaguar XJ220 I looked at last time, the F1 was a road car first and then turned into a racing machine. Designed by Gordon Murray, it was designed to be the king of the road cars, and was actually never intended to be used in any racing capacity at all. And this was a car designed in the late 80s and released in the early 90s, and for a time, the stats achieved by it were mind-blowing. Just to ream off a quick fact sheet here, the car was a two-door coupe with a rear-mounted 6.1 litre naturally aspirated BMW V12, capable of putting out 618 horsepower, 627 PS or 461 kilowatts, depending on which units you use. It also weighed 1.1 tonnes or 2,500 pounds, which, by car standards, it's a bag of sugar, and it all added up to enter the Guinness Book of Records as the fastest production car ever built at the time, achieving 240.1 miles an hour in a straight line, until the Bugatti Veyron came along in 2005, which topped out at 253. For reference, the record is now set by the Koenigsegg Agera RS, 277 miles an hour. The F1, I think, is still the fastest naturally aspirated road car ever, since the Veyron, the SSC Ultimate Aero, the Veyron Supersport and the Agera are all twin turbos. So with that background out of the way, in 1994 the BPR Global GT Series had begun, which started as a potential replacement for the World Sports Car Championship that died in 1992, along with the Group C category, stuff I've covered at length before. The good thing about this series is that manufacturers took an interest immediately, such as Ferrari and Porsche, and in the pursuit of speed, some teams were looking at the McLaren smashing every road car record in sight and thinking, this might work. Murray, though, didn't want to allow the F1 to be used on the track. It was supposed to be a road car that had actually got the laws changed in the UK to allow the driving position to be legal, because the F1 steering wheel is in the centre, as opposed to being on the right like every other car built for our roads. Ray Bellum of Team Dynamics and John Nielsen later went to Murray and said, "Oh come on, be a pal, let us use your car to win stuff." So Murray finally relented and allowed the car to be turned into a racing machine, with one of the unused F1 road cars being taken to McLaren to be used as a prototype. And it didn't take much work at all to get it ready, because according to McLaren, at 100 miles an hour the car produced enough downforce to stick itself to the roof of a tunnel, as it was, factory fresh. They put a bigger wing on it, stripped the interior, put a restrictor on the engine to limit the power to 600 horsepower, added carbon brakes, added extra cooling, and, well, that was about it really. They'd kept the standard engine and gearbox, not even tuning them or replacing them, and concerns around the gearbox were noted because, again, it was a road gearbox. It wasn't a 3-hour race gearbox, let alone a 24-hour one. They had to drive the car for 24 hours with no mistakes, no misshifts, no over-aggressive blipping, none of that stuff if they wanted to enter Le Mans and finish. The car then won the first 6 rounds of the BPR series in 1995, and then all focus turned to Le Mans, as McLaren decided to enter a car that it had developed in-house, along with all the other teams that had got the customer ones for the BPR series. The car in question is number 59, the one based off the unused road car chassis number 19. This was the test mule that was going to be used by Kokusai Kaihatsu Racing. I hope I've got that right, my Japanese is, well, it's non-existent. And it was driven by Yannick Dalmas, Masanori Sakaya and JJ Leto, who had supposedly been doing some work with McLaren and Mercedes to do comparison work between the Mercedes engine that had gone into the 1995 McLaren F1 car and how that had all compared to the Renault he tested at Ligier, an updated version of which now being in the Williams. So with McLaren's own car now on the entry list, albeit in the hands of someone other than McLaren, the rest of the cars descended upon Le Mans for the 1995 edition, which was still in that weird transitional phase. 1994, the previous edition, was the last for Group C cars to enter, a race I've covered because it involved a Porsche big brain moment to dodge the rulebook and enter a car that was way too quick, or something like that. It was a long time ago. Now, Le Mans had the world sports car as the primary class, a class that later evolved into the LMP1 rocket ships we know and love from about, 10 years ago. One of these cars was the Courage C34, driven by Bob Wallach, Eric Hellery, and some guy called Mario Andretti. But just after the start, it chucked it down, and any advantage the prototypes had was gone. If it was held today, they'd have been trundling behind the safety car until it eased, and it didn't really ease until the morning. The WR team's cars had to enter the pits because their windscreens were faulty, and just before nightfall, Andretti spun off at the Porsche curves lapping a slower car, and that cost him 6 laps in repairs. Prior to this though, Patrick Gonin, or Gonan, I'm assuming it's Gonan because he's French, had aquaplaned and somehow backflipped on the Mulsanne, breaking 4 ribs and his scapula, his shoulder blade, so the safety car was well out for well over half an hour. While everyone was spinning off, having failures or otherwise having bad luck, the McLarens continued to soldier on. They had way better traction than everybody else, and Leto appeared to be using the rear engine nature of the car to slide it slightly through the corners, at one point lapping about 30 seconds faster than the next fastest GT1. Citation needed on that though. Into the night, the first place WSC car was in 11th. Leto's car had been moving its way up the field to get it into second by 3 AM. It took so long to get there because when Dalmas and Sakaya were in the car, they were taking it easy, nursing the car on the wet track to make sure it survived. When Leto was in the car, he was in full if in doubt flat out mode, and the team couldn't hardwire him to slow down. The team had told the other two to stick to an agreed lap time, but Leto decided that that wasn't fast enough, so in the night he was able to find lines that the others weren't using to go faster. Everybody who was there said basically the same thing. It was incredible to watch, but you were just hoping he didn't stack it. Leto was also helped by an innovative piece of preparation made by McLaren in the build-up to the event. They'd installed an extra set of lights in the car that pointed across the bonnet to the apex of the corners, a little like the runway turn-off lights on many commercial airliners, which allowed a better view of any apex the car was heading towards. Runway turn-off lights basically do the same thing on an aircraft to illuminate taxiways or obstacles on either side, and they'd even tested these new lights on the McLaren at an airport. The Mach 1 McLaren that was leading the race had to pit for fresh brake pads, dropping a minute to Leto's car, after which Derek Bell, then aged 53, was pumping in times that matched the Finn, still showing that he'd got it after all of this time. By morning, the rain had eased and the sports cars started clawing back time on the Mach 1 and the Kaihatsu GT1s. All 3 of these prototypes that remained. With 2 hours to go, the transmission on the Mach 1 car started playing up, and when it pitted, Dalmas went into the lead in the Kaihatsu car. Andretti then passed the Mach 1 car with less than 60 minutes left on the clock. Then Ron Dennis got on the phone. Something that became emotional was the stickers on the windscreen with McLaren written on them. They were peeling off because of the rain, and I believe Ron was at home watching the race, and he was getting very irate about the stickers coming off to the point where he was advocating that we should box and replace them. That suggestion wasn't taken up. Andretti handed his car over to Wallach for the final stint, but the McLaren held on to take the victory. A car that had only minor modifications, no previous experience, nothing in the way of data against those it was racing against, but had prevailed in the tricky conditions to beat the faster class of car. It meant that McLaren became the first constructor to win the Triple Crown, matching up with Graham Hill's record as a driver. And you might think that in doing so they managed to deny Andretti the Triple Crown, but Andretti never won at Monaco. In fact, his record at Monaco is pretty bad. He only raced there 8 times in his Formula 1 career, and that was because this was an era of best results counting, so he'd often skip Monaco to go back and do the Indy 500. The car that won was sent back to Woking to become a museum piece and was never raced again. In 1996, the competition became stiffer as Porsche was now in as a factory team and McLaren would finish behind them, and Lister, Panos, Nissan and others were now in the race for 1997, but the McLarens would still get a class win in 1997. Leto, meanwhile, didn't finish that 1997 race, but it's cool to note that his teammates that year were Nelson Piquet and Steve Soper. Soper being the man who John Cleland gave the middle finger to at Silverstone as he clawed his way back through the field with his rear bumper caved in. By 1998, the McLarens were way off the pace, and in 1999 LMGT1 was abandoned and the cars couldn't be used, but 1999 would bring its own stories with it. Something about Mark Webber, Peter Dumbreck, and gymnastics. The McLaren F1 GTR at Le Mans is a story I've wanted to look at for a while, and in a way it's a little like the Mazda 787B story from 1991. The car didn't win because it was much faster than everybody else, or exploited a loophole to go 10 seconds a lap faster than everybody else. It just did better in the pouring rain than everybody else. But it did all of it with a new wing, some extra cooling, some new brakes, and a bit of a diet. By racing car standards, it was stock. So then a look at the McLaren F1 GTR Le Mans victory from 1995. If this has been new for you like it was for me, then do like the video so I know when education was done, and for more like this, get subscribed with the bell on for all the latest. Massive thanks as ever to the kind folk at Patreon, and if you want to help out at a more personal level, there's a link to Patreon in the description, along with links to Discord, socials, and other bits and pieces that you might want or need to know. There's a F1 store affiliate link down there as well if you just want to give me a little bit of a kickback on anything you buy. And as always, there's super thanks if you just want to buy me a coffee. So until next time, I've been AdmiralLaWind, have a cracking day wherever you are, and I'll see you all again soon for another video. Goodbye.